was born on the farm in Rugby, North Dakota, August the 2nd, 1911.
My mother was born in Odessa, Russia. She came over here. I think she was either 10 or 11. Her education at that time was equivalent to a high school education, which was in Russian and German both. My dad was born in 1884.
It was in Europe. He came over from Alsace-Lorraine when he was just a baby. And when he came over, North Dakota was still part of Louisiana's purchase.
My parents were married in 1910. My mother made her dress in secrecy because they were against Mother Mary, a farmer. That was beyond her standard of life.
They eloped, went to Devil's Lake, and Mr. Crockett, he was a real estate man, and he gave Dad the car so they could go to Devil's Lake and get married. That's the dress I cut up. And she hid it under the eave of the house as they were married, and that's where I got into it and cut it up. It was no angel.
This is my mother's family, the Schiff family.
And this is Mother. She was married, and she was pregnant with me at that time when this picture was taken.
This is my grandpa, and his name was Frank.
He was a judge.
Over in Russia. Now, when he came into this country, he never, ever went out and did any work outside. That was below his standard. He was an educated man, and he stayed in the house. This is my grandma. Her name was Cecilia. That's my dad's parents, my grandparents, Louis and Margaret. I liked them. They were great. It was so different from my mother's parents. More down to earth.
I was 3 years old when World War I started. Woodrow Wilson, I guess, was our president.
Well, she was hoping that Dad didn't have to go, but he was called to report.
And he went into town, and he came back, and I could see Mother and Dad down in the dining room telling Mother that he cannot go because he cannot turn his right hand all the way over. He had a birth defect. He couldn't turn his right hand, and that saved him from going to the war.
And the strange thing about that, Ed, my nephew, Cecilia's boy, George, both his hands are like that. And he was in the military for 20 years.
And this is at the bar. My dad is here. That's one of his brothers here. And this is another brother. And I was sitting over here someplace, dive into town, and he always went with him, and he took me into the bar. My mother had a fit. That's our house. Dad built that house before they were married.
There was no electricity, no running water, and the toilet, you had to go outside, a special place outside to go. In the cold winter days, it was very comfortable. And the toilet tissue was the catalog.
I am the oldest of 6 children: Cecilia, Frank, Louis, Joe, and Pius, who died 2 months old. And that's my first communion. I think I was 11. Oh, this dress, it was bought in Sanford at Spiegel's. It was $10 and some cents.
A store-bought dress was unusual. Mother sewed all the clothes for the kids when we were young. When I learned to sew, I made my own clothes. We had a sewing machine, and the name of it was White. It had a pedal. It was not electric. You had to pedal there to sew it. My mother had one of the cook stove existed at that time, which burned coal or wood. And there was on the end of the stove was a reservoir. You put your water in there, and the water was heated. I helped my mother when I was real small. We made our own butter, every week. We would put the cream in there and churned it. I mean, pumped it up and down until it turned into butter. And take it out and wash it and clean it. And chick ups and store at home always wanted the mother's butter because it was nice and clean. Because it's a lot how you treat your butter after you churned it. They didn't get electricity at all there until I left. You had your own kerosene lights you lit at nighttime. Then later on, the other light came in. I've forgotten the name of it. You had to put air into it, and you put little mandals on the light, lit those first, and they burned. And then they lit, and they were real bright. I went to a country school about a mile from home. The most we had, I think, 24 in that school, from first grade to the 8th grade. And our classes were about 15 minutes because of second grade, third grade. You know, we went up in the front of the room, there were seats there, and we sat down there. There might be 2 or 3 in the same class. We didn't have all the convenience, and we learned, I think we learned a lot more than they do now. The boys used to play baseball, and they always chose me the first one. I could play ball pretty good, because we played ball at home with my dad. I wasn't in grade school very long when the government banned alcohol. I remember that well. My neighbors made their own alcohol. They used to sell 1 gallon of whiskey. I think it's $20. And somebody must have turned them in. I was upstairs. They lived right across the road from us. And here I saw the federal men throwing out all kinds of stuff out on the grass. And whatever he had making the whiskey with, brew, whatever it called it, they found it and threw it all out.
That's my mother. And my sister, that was our car, a Chevy. The first car was a Ford, and you had to put the curtains up. You used to lock in it because you could get in there. You cranked it up in the front. Then when he sold it, Dad was a good friend of Dr. Coons. He had the Chevy dealers. The first big car was a Landau. He gave that to Dad for $800. And Mother never drove another car after he gave up the Ford. One time, the folks were gone, and Dad left the keys in the Ford touring car. I turned it on, and was driving. Next thing, I didn't know how to drive a car. I put the one wheel right down in the basement, the cellar, the door. Well, my sister got everything out of me she wanted, so she wouldn't tell. I was no angel.
I think I was 12. I just feel like getting a job in town. And Mother told me I can go. She never thought I would get work. But I went down to the church, said a prayer, went to the Pierce County Tribune. And Mrs. McClintock had just called in, and I went down there, and she hired me. I was surprised at it. I never could eat with them. I had to eat by myself, and my mother did not like that. I wasn't there too long because my folks weren't happy about the situation. And my brothers and sister sure kept me broke. My parents just wanted me to get a good education. And so I did. They sent me to high school at St. Benedicts Academy at St. Joe, Minnesota. It was 400 miles from Rugby. I was there for the first quarter, and I didn't like it. I got homesick, so I went home for Christmas, and I had to promise my folks that I'd go back again. And I said, yes, just to get home. But I didn't. I packed my clothes, went home, and stayed home.
I was no angel.
We bought our own thresh machine rig on our farm, and then other people hired us. And we went to their place and did threshing for them. Mother made some homemade beer, and they all come in, on a Sunday, came and build that coke car. It was one big room. There was a stove and a long bench where the men sat to eat. We had about 21 men, And we had a couple there that were from Minnesota, Fergus, Minnesota. And he's supposed to be kind of flunky help with Dad. And she's supposed to do the meals. I was 15 at that time. And they both left because they didn't like the work. So who was put in charge of cooking for 21 men? I was. And I cooked 3 meals a day. My cousin was with me, helped me. And my mother made the bread, homemade bread. We didn't buy bread, we made it. We also slept in the coke car. No man ever left counted their meals. So I was proud of that because a lot of the places, the men left because the meals weren't good. In the fall, I went to St. Mary's Academy in Devil's Lake, North Dakota. I had to board there, but it was only 60 miles away, and I could come home on weekends. It was in North Dakota, it wasn't in Minnesota. I worked my way through school. Any place I was needed, I helped. Kitchen, washing dishes, cleaning floors. I never thought about it very much. It's just one of those things you had to do. Everybody thought I may make a good nurse. And I was home a year or 2, and then I went to Omaha, to Creighton, to take up nursing. St. Catherine's Hospital is where I took my training through Creighton. The heat got the best of me. I broke out with prickly heat. I thought the girls put salt in my bed one night, and I got out and said, who put salt in my bed? I was just red, prickly heat, and I thought I had to quit and go home. It was that bad. But after a while, evidently I adjusted myself to it. I was not a giver-upper. I stuck out stuff. We went to school besides taking care of patients. We had the regular classes: anatomy, physiology, pharmacy, pathology. We learned to give shots, injection and stuff, and that was a hard thing for me. It's the hardest thing for me to push a needle into somebody's arms. I was going to close my eyes, and my instructor said, don't you close your eyes, and I found out in nursing, you don't close your eyes for nothing. You keep them open. But I got over that, except for children. Well, we saw patients all from the beginning. It was altogether different what's now. We had no nurse aides or anything. We cleaned our own rooms, made our own beds and everything. When I was in training, one of my patients was Father Flanagan. He's a founder of Boise Town. Boise Town was 10 miles away from Omaha. You never wanted to do anything special for him or a thing. When he was ready to go home, he told me to go down to the office to get the bill. I went out, came back. I said, Father Flanagan, there's no bill. He says, I am not the charity case. He himself went down to the office then, and he's paid his bill. I finished my classes and got my RN from Creighton University. Because we had to pass the state board exams too. I made it. I think I was the 3rd highest. I was doing the lab work that morning. I was just doing the blood count when the news came on that Pearl Harbor was attacked. I just dropped everything. I was just completely stunned. I didn't expect anything like that. I think that was a shock, the biggest shock of my life. And I was worried because I had cousins over there. In fact, one of them was on the ship that was bombed. He told me, he said the bomb almost fell in his pocket. And I worked at a hospital where I graduated, St. Catherine's in Omaha. A little later on, I came home and went to Havre, Montana. My sister was out there. Her husband was in the military, and I stayed with her while I went to work. I was in charge nurse, which is the nurse that supervises shifts at the hospital, the Deaconess Hospital, which was affiliated with the Methodist Episcopal Church. And one of the patients was upset because I was a Catholic and working in the Deaconess Hospital. And I happened to be on a special case, Mrs. Rungo, and her husband was a well-known man in Havre. They couldn't fire me because they would have had to deal with Mr. Rungo. I was working in Havre when penicillin came out. Infection that wasn't able to be controlled before we controlled it. First it comes in little vials, and you took it there. Pretty soon it came, you had to mix it yourself. And I found out, after mixing it, I itched. So I couldn't even mix it. In 1946, my dad died. That's my mother besides Dad's grave. Dad was at Rugby at the cemetery. Dad needed to go to the hospital, his surgery. And so we took him to Rochester. My dad was a patient at the Mayo Clinic with cancer of the cardiac region of the stomach. And he died there. The day before Mother's Day. But when he died, for sudden, I felt I was in a different place. I've never forgotten that. My mother said the same thing after Dad died. It was like we were in a different room. It was not the same room. It's just changed. From Havre, I moved to Fort Harrison near Helena, Montana. I was offered a position in the Veterans Hospital. That's where I met Daniel Goerger. He was in the dental department. He had been dismissed from the military because of his health. He was a patient there, at the Veterans Hospital. Not on my floor, but on another floor. And one day I asked him what his profession was. I forgot. He gave me a goofy answer. I know it wasn't true. I just laughed and left him. And I left there because we got a new chief nurse, and she wouldn't let me go and take time off to go to Mass. And I told her I'd be the last one to go off the floor if I'd be needed. But on Sundays, it was just slow. And she wouldn't see my point. So I told her, I'm through. Some of the doctors were very unhappy when I told them about it, I was leaving. But I thought I could get a job any place. When I left, when I had this fallout with the VA, I went up to Great Falls, and I went to Mass St. Anne's Cathedral. When I came out, there was Stan. And he knew I had left. So he looked for me up there, and that's why, after a couple of weeks or so, he asked me out, so we went out for a date. A couple of years, we got married, I think. It was about 2 years. That's when we were married. I don't think I even bought an extra dress. This dress, one of the dresses I had in my closet. There's none of my family there. Dan and I just got married. Yeah, and Anna Marie was our bridesmaid. And when Anna Marie got married, I was her bridesmaid. That's Stan's car. It was a coupe with the rumble seat in the back. On weekends, we did a lot. That's me walking up at Glacier Park. I climbed the glacier, all right, but I had to slide down. I was wet. Bought our own tent, pitched our own tent, put our cots up, and went fishing. I love that. I love going fishing. At the Flathead Lake. Daddy used to get so mad at me. He said he followed all the rules and I didn't, and I caught the fish. But I couldn't take the fish off the line though. He had to come and take the fish off the hook. I couldn't do that. Clean them right there, put them on the pan and fry them. And they were good. Rainbow trout. A deer there came up to the table, then fed it. We were driving, and that bear was in the middle of the road. They're coming up to the car to get some food. The road was quite slippery. He's putting the chains on there. In about 1950, we moved to Minneapolis. They used to take pictures on the streets. You walk and somebody took pictures of you. I was upset very much so there. And we were walking down the street in Minneapolis and looking in the windows. My dad got that for me. Went in there, he says, told mother, he says, you better buy her a good coat. And that was a fur coat. Dad went to school there. He went back to the university there 1 year. I worked at the University Hospital in Minneapolis. All I wanted was general duty, no responsibility. I wasn't there out 2 weeks and I was in charge again. I did not like it. I would work on the ward of cancer, and that was depressing. Our marriage is almost 3 years when John was born. When he was about 5 days old there. I was born at St. Mary's at Minneapolis, Minnesota. Oh, John was named after my dad. His second name was Warren, after Dan's friend, Warren Birch. He was the best baby, very happy baby. After Minneapolis, we went back to Great Falls, and that's where you got the idea he liked to go to gunsmithing, and that's when we moved down to Trinidad. And we lived in a Quonset hut. John had his first birthday in a Quonset hut. He raised his hand, next thing it was in the frosting. He was a good friend of mine. He raised those German Shepherds for the military. She gave them to John as a gift. This is a picture of John and Coco. Coco wasn't supposed to be in the picture. We locked the dog in the house, and we walked down to the studio, it's just a block from us. Next thing, we looked out, there was Coco. And we just got her, had her about a couple of hours. Dan got his degree in gunsmithing, but he decided he didn't like it, so that's why he went back in physical science instruction then. And we went back to Great Falls in our first new car, a Nash Rambler. Saul came out with a polio vaccine in 1955. There was a big push for everyone to get inoculated. Dan, John, and I all got our shots. Dan was teaching. He got home early to watch John while I worked the afternoon shift at Columbus Hospital. I went to work, it was on my birthday. And when Dan called me, his dad called me, he says, John can't walk. And I went home, and the diagnosis was made polio. And he had the shot just a week or so before that. After John got sick, we found that the batch of vaccine was bad. But it was too late. If we wouldn't have taken the down shot, we probably would have never gotten it. His right leg was put in a brace, full-length brace. And he had that for a few years. John was in the hospital 2 months. I know the day they said he could come home from the hospital. He got up and said, see, I can walk him down the hall as fast as he could go so he could get home. After a while, we moved to Roberts, then to Arlee. John had only 4 more birthdays with his back. He had polycystic kidneys. And if I tell you that's an agony, and at that time they didn't have anything what they have now. The dialysis weren't in or a thing. And I used to come home from school and I gave him a quarter of morphine and hardly even felt that pain. It hardly subsided the pain. Dan was teaching in Arlee, Montana. When he kind of got so sick, I had to take him to Salt Lake City. And he died in Salt Lake City. John and I moved to Missoula after Dan died. At first we had a trailer, then I bought a house. My neighbor Mary had a brother who visited her. His name was Vern Doney. Yeah, his sister told me he was a mobile home dealer. And he came over, asked me out, and I didn't go. And unless I take John. Came friends. John wanted a dad. And he said, I like Vern. Why don't you marry him? He was the instigator. After a while, I married him. We bought a travel trailer, and we went all over the place. To visit my sister in Bainville, to the Redwoods in California, to the Grand Canyon, to Houston and the Space Center, to Mexico and the pyramid. Yeah, I walked up. It's quite a long ways up there. But when you looked at the steps, they were just like that, straight down. They were all lined up. You couldn't see that. So I just sat down. I was scared to walk down, so I just sat on the step and just clumped down on the step, sitting on each step. In '67, Vern's son Ed joined us. The four of us drove across Canada to Montreal. I'll never forget that trip. It was a long trip. Vern wanted me to drive the trailer. A new experience for me, but I learned. I didn't think it was a little trailer. The trailer we had was 31 feet, but I drove. We moved to Tustin, California the next year. John graduated from high school there, and we moved to Boise. Vern built a house on the hill. He was over 70 years old, but he did a lot of the work himself. I liked that you could look out. There were windows in the bedroom and the living room. And that's in the dining room and the living room. They're both. We had a lot of windows, and I made the drapes. I never made drapes in my life before. I worked a little while, but I finally got what I wanted. After a few years, we moved to Mesa. In 1979, we bought this house in Leisure World. My mother died in 1972. Vern died in 1991. Oh, this is the last picture of my brothers and sister together. And they're all gone now. My brother Frank died first, then Cecilia, Louis, and Joe. I had a wonderful, a family. I don't think you could have had a better family than I did. And there isn't anybody goes through life that hasn't got trouble. So why elaborate on it? Take each day at a time and make the best what you got. This is my 100th birthday coming up. I never thought I'd live this long, but it's a surprise for me. I'm still around, still able to drive the car, and I passed my driving license with no stipulations. And do my own laundry, my own housework, fix my own meals, and do what I want to do and enjoy myself. I'm having a good time. Are we finished now?